QML also provides some standard views that we have for displaying the model. We have the grid view, the list view, the table view. The table view, again, is not to be confused with the QML controls table view. That's a different view. There's other types of views that we can get from other modules, again, such as locations. Quick Controls 2 provides us with a scroll, swipe, and stack view. Charts has additional views. Other modules also have additional views. Generally, Qt will provide the options you need for your view. So if you're not sure if Qt provides something, just do a quick search and you'll find out really quick if that's in a different module that you have to load. The ones we're going to focus today are the standard ones. So our standard ones are the list view, the grid view, and the table view. Now, the list view is just a simple list. The grid view is the one you see in the middle here. That's generally has a number of rows and columns. It's very often used like you see here, where it has an icon and some sort of text. And then the table view, which can have a number of rows and any number of columns. Now, before we go any further, we have to talk about how we define the delegate. Again, in our last session, I mentioned that there were two ways to create our own QML items. The first way that we covered was creating the items using the item type or a derived from item type. And I mentioned that the second method was creating components. So here we're going to look at the components a little more. So the delegate property of the view expects a template object of the component type. And when we create components, we have to provide an ID property always, because the component isn't created at that time. We need some way to reference it. These are just going to be created as needed, right? So we always need to assign that ID. And the component can be looked at like it's kind of like an inline QML document. And it has that single top level item, just like everything else. And the component itself can't define properties or behaviors outside of that top level other than the ID property. So the only thing that component can define for itself is the ID. So the properties can be exposed from the top level here. And the way we're going to do that is they have to be accessible through the view's context. So the types, the repeater types, the instancer, and the views, they expose a view property to this delegate that we can use as seen here. So we can get the current index. We can use the index to set the color by getting the list view's view and then accessing the property of the list view that way. Now, we can emit a signal if it's clicked on or anything like that within the text itself, but we might want to know where it's coming from. So it's useful to have that the index property there. Now, the first thing we're going to look at here is going to be the list view, which we kind of looked at a little bit earlier when we did the column. It's very similar to that. The main difference between the views and the repeaters is that the repeater by default is going to load the entire model into memory, whether it's displayed on screen or not. And the views are generally going to swap those out while they are for what's being displayed. Now, the list view, again, as it suggests, is just a list. And it can be laid out either horizontally or vertically. The default value is vertical of its orientation property, but we could change that to horizontal if you set the orientation. Now, we also have a grid view, which allows us to render in a grid formation. The setup is basically the same as the list view. We're going to look at these later when we look at the demo. We just give it the model, and then we give it the delegate that we're going to render with. And then the data, it's going to be a list, usually. Most common use of this is for like a menu system where you have an icon and a text under it that's usually laid out in a grid. And the grid will, it will make the rows and columns for you so they lay out nicely. Now, here's just an example of our icon delegate. This is set up within a column, and the column just has two children. It has our image and our text so that they sit under each other. And for each of these, the grid view is going to rely on the dimensions of either these or the specifically set grid size in the grid view. So if you don't set those, it's going to use the size of your component to determine what size each grid space is going to be. So make sure that you set a size either here or force a size in the grid view. Now, the grid view, just like the other views, like the list view, is flickable by default. And one extra thing that it gets is it has the ability to have a header, a highlight, and a footer. And these are just simple properties that we can define additional components for. The header, of course, is shown as a header, the footer on the bottom as a footer, and the highlight is for the current item. We can also disable dragging and flicking if we set the interactive property to false. Here's an example of how we can use the grid view's header, footer, and highlight. We just create an item for each of these. Here we're just using a rectangle with a simple color, and it will place them in the appropriate positions for us. Now, the last thing I want to talk about briefly is the table view, which is fairly new to QML as of Qt 5.12. We are not talking about the Qt Quick Controls version 1 table view. Again, this one is known to have issues and should not be used. The table view can display a list model, but if you do that, you're only going to populate the first column. And generally, in order to use the table view, you're going to be creating your own model using the QAbstract table model and then exposing that to QML.
Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to our channel and check out the free QML programming course on our website. The link is in the description.